Alright, so let's do something a little bit different this week. So I'm going to be replacing some outlets and I'm going to help you out. First thing you want to do is you want to make sure that there's no power. If there is power, these lights will turn on. So that's why I'm using the circuit tester to make sure that there's no power. You can also use a multimeter to make sure that there's no power. You're going to need to do that for light switches and stuff like that. But in this case, you could use a circuit tester to basically test the circuit and make sure that there's no power or juice before you do anything. And if you don't feel comfortable doing any of this, please don't. Talk to a licensed electrician, talk to someone who's done this before, and let them do it for you. Don't take it upon yourself to play around with electric. It's definitely not something you want to play with. So one of the tips that I recommend is if you have a newly painted wall, is to make sure you score around the outlet plate, so that when you're pulling it out, that you're not pulling on the paint itself. You believe it or not, if you do that, you might actually damage the paint and have to repaint that area. So score around the top, and you can see you can give yourself a nice clean cut, and the outlet could be removed easily. Alright, so now the outlet is out, there's no power, and you want to do is just basically take a look at the hot line, the black line, it could be black or red, your white, which is your neutral, and then your green, that's your ground, right? Green or bare copper, that's your ground. Now what you want to do is you want to start removing the screws that are holding it in place, and don't worry about the screws, dropping, right? Because you're going to use the screws off of the new ones. So take the old ones and just dispose of them. Just unscrew them all the way so that you can get the wire off of the old outlet. So just one by one. This one's an easy one because you just have a hot, you have a neutral, and a ground. So basically you want to pay attention where they were, right, in relationship to the outlet itself. Right? One will be on one side, one will be on the other, and the ground will be top or bottom, depending on the type of outlet that you have. So you can see the color of the outlet. The new outlet's a little bit whiter, right? So back in the early 2000s, the beige outlets were like construction standard, and now everyone's going to white. What I'm doing is basically the screws that are not being used, I'm just driving them down, right? So I know the top one right here for the neutral was used, so I'm driving home the other one. So that's out of the way. Now you want to reinstall the wires exactly the way they were. So in this case, the wire is kind of turn around too much, right? The loop is too tight, so I can't get it around the screw. So what you want to do is you want to just open it up a little bit. So use your pliers to open it up, so you can reinstall the wires exactly the way they were before, and then screw them back into position. Now I'm doing the neutral. And finally the ground. Just make sure there's good contact. Sometimes the ground is so, the loop is so tight, and it's damaged that you're going to have to cut it. So you could use the Linesman Pliers to just basically cut it and then re-loop it around the ground terminal. But in this case, I was able to make it work. Organize your wires, and then place the outlet back into position, and then screw the receptacle back into the box. Make sure it's tight, make sure it's straight, and then drive it home. They don't have to be super tight, just tight enough. Snug up against the wall. Alright, so now that it's in position, what you want to do is turn on your circuit and just make sure that that everything that the circuit tester is showing that everything's correct. Right? You get those 2 orange lights, that means it's correct. And you could do this when all the outlets that you're doing are done. Right? You see how that's correct? And you're complete with that one outlet. Let's try another outlet, right? Some outlets are a little bit different than others. The setup is different, but again, first thing you want to do is just make sure power is off. If not, find the breaker that's associated with that outlet, make sure it's off, and turn it off. Safety first. Again, score around the top and bottom to make sure it doesn't rip or tear the paint off of the wall. Right? It doesn't, just take your time. Usually when you're in a rush or you're tired, you make mistakes. You don't want to do that. Alright, so this is a standard one, right? This has 1 power, 1 hot, 1 neutral, and 1 ground again. So follow the same instructions. Remove the screws. Move the wires out of the way so you have access. Disconnect the neutral and the ground. Straighten the wires out again. And most importantly, when you buy your outlets, make sure that the voltage and the amperage for that receptacle matches the one that you're removing from the wall. This is a 15 amp 125 volt. So they check and we're good. Right? I'm driving the screws down, the ones I'm not going to be using. I'm checking the other side. I'm going to do the same thing to the other side. Alright, bottom was used. I'm going to drive home the top. Get that out of the way. I'm going to open up this loop because it's a little too tight. And install it around the screw. With the drill, you can get it pretty tight, but I always check at the tail end with a screwdriver just to make sure, because you'd be surprised, you know, sometimes it just doesn't drive it all the way. And copper's very malleable, so you can kind of make it a little bit tighter if you want. You want to make sure that there's no loose wires, it doesn't eventually become loose, because that's when arcing happens and it could be a problem. Taking my flathead screwdriver and just kind of driving it home, making sure they're very tight. Place everything back into the box. Screw the receptacle back to the box. Make sure it's straight and centered with the box, because that's going to affect how it looks when everything is all said and done, and then drive it home. Again, not super tight, just tight enough so it's snug up against the wall and it doesn't move. Alright, sometimes you're going to run into an outlet that's got 4 wires, right? Because of the way that it's wired, it's looped with other receptacles. So, in this case, just pay attention, right? Top, bottom, your hot terminal wires, your neutrals, and just duplicate it on the new receptacle. If that top black wire or that hot wire is on the top, put that back on top of the new receptacle. Vice versa. And then my tip is basically to start with one side, Do the one side first and then move over to the other side. There's also a tab in between these, right? You got to pay attention to those tabs. You see that right there? That tab right there separates the hot and the neutral if they're independent, if they're working independently. So if they're together, then that means the neutral's just flowing through, okay? But if they're broken, if that's removed, that tab, like it is on the right-hand side of your screen right there, then that means you need to duplicate that, right? You gotta copy that on the new receptacle. And then all you gotta do is basically take a set of plier and then bend it back and forth until it breaks off, right? So if that tab is not there and you need to break it off, that's how you do it. And these are the tools that I used. Very simple. A drill, flathead screwdriver, Linesman Pliers. That's basically it. And that's circuit tester. Thanks guys. I hope this was helpful.